This episode will be completely taken out of context. Welcome to the Fact Check This podcast. All right, Fact Check This podcast, episode 40, and I've got Giles Miller back on with me as promised for about a week and a half. Finally stopped being a total screw up and got this put together. So
Me too.
Yeah, we're both about equally culpable in that. So I'm going to throw out a disclaimer at the front end of this. None of this is necessarily hard beliefs that I have. It's a lot of stuff that I have theorized and kind of put together ideas. And tonight, Giles and I are not going to talk about politics at all. We are going to stick with religion and theology and that sort of stuff, and I'm going to bounce some crazy off-the-wall ideas off of him and see where we go with it. So, Giles, you ready to rock and roll with this?
I am. I think I'm ready. We'll see how crazy it gets. I already have some pretty crazy ideas myself, so
yeah. So on the last episode, we ended up talking for another hour and a half or so after the episode about some of that. So kind of explain some of your biblical studies background and sort of some of your ideas on things, and then we'll kind of roll from there.
Sure. Well, I'm excited to upset everybody and have everybody think that I'm out of my mind just immediately. So yeah, my background, if you will, my dad was I don't know. I'd say a student in general. He studied not in any sort of professional setting, but basically his entire life. And one of the three things that he went through were martial arts, English, because he was a writer, and the Bible. And basically he just mastered those three things, got multiple black belts, published several stuff, and then just did lots of studying. And then, of course, me being, growing up with it, I had to rebel. as most people do that get raised with anything, they rebel against whatever their parents are into. And when I got older, I always sort of believed it. I just didn't want it. Just wasn't something active that I wanted to be a part of. Anyway, around the age of 22 or so, 7 years ago. Sounds like a long time, but it's been pretty quick. I decided to get into it myself to see, like, okay, let me go through the data, see how I feel about everything, see if it makes sense, and I'll sort of go from there. And so that's exactly what I started to do. And I don't really have any sort of like a bias. I don't particularly care to hold any idea. I'm just interested in getting as close to truth and as close to like a moral, ethical sort of lifestyle as possible. Probably one of the things that led me over to, libertarianism in the first place was it's just such a, I didn't care about the law or the state. I cared about truth and justice and, honesty and not stealing from people and, things like that. So those same sort of things are what pushed me to want to learn myself. And so yeah, I don't have any particular bent. I don't care to hold an idea that doesn't hold any water, which is from the Bible, that phrase. So it led me to a lot of really unique beliefs, which I suppose I could label out some of the main ones, like the Trinity. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of the Trinity. But it's basically that God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit are three different things, yet are the same thing simultaneously. And I don't believe that. And I don't think that it's scripturally supported at all. I think actually it says the opposite pretty, kind of over and over again in no ambiguous language, very directly. So that's probably one of the biggest ones. And I mean, I'll break down a few more, but just to sort of sum it up, the similarities between me and like modern Christianity are so far apart. The only thing we have in common are the names of the people in the book, but basically nothing else, not who they were or even really what they did or what they believed or what their general message was. I don't have anything in common, which is weird. But all I care about is what does the Bible say? And I think that when you have to leave the Bible to explain what's in the Bible, that's when you should know that you're in some weird territory. So hell, I don't believe in hell. I don't think it's scripturally supported at all. And the overall theme of the Bible, right? God's staggering love for his creation, the idea of an eternal place of fire and torture for somebody that steals a candy bar or something, it just isn't compatible. It's just not compatible. If that were the God of the Bible, then just the entire thing would have to be written differently. So no hell, no Jesus is God. I don't believe in getting water baptized. I don't think that's scripturally supported either. So yeah, there's probably a ton more. Jesus, of course, wasn't born on December 25th. He wasn't killed on Friday, and he wasn't resurrected on Sunday. I could keep going if you'd like me to.
Oh, I know. I should have just hit record and let it play the last time when we had the full conversation, because it was excellent content. Like, I loved every second of it. But we are going to start with some of my theorizing,
Okay.
and like I said, these are not actually strongly held beliefs or anything. They're just ideas that I like kicking around and exploring a little bit on. So you did bring up hell, and obviously, as a species, as we've learned and grown and evolved, we've figured out that what's lies within the clouds is not some mystical thing. It's clouds. So heaven is not this thing floating in the clouds above us. And likewise, we have a pretty good idea of what lies at the core of the earth. And while it is definitely, pretty hot, it's not hell. It's just the juicy core of a planet. So there's not this realm below us, and there's not this realm above us, which brings me to something that I like to delve into and think about, is the possibility of multiple universes and multiple dimensions within our own reality, effectively. So it's my kind of theorization that heaven is another universe. It's an alternate dimension. And the same for hell. Hell is an alternate dimension. It's not, they're not connected to our world. They exist in other places. So, it's, and then with that, if you start to look at some of the things, have you ever heard of the book? It's called The Unseen Realm. It's by a guy, Michael Heiser. Okay, so in The Unseen Realm, and I haven't read the entire thing, which is to my fault. I got started on it, and I've gone through different parts of it, but I haven't read the whole thing all the way through. But something that he explores in The Unseen Realm is that there are other gods. It's like there is the one God, but he exists with other lesser gods, effectively, and they all acknowledge him as the one God. And so, that takes me to, like, who's to say that the gods of Norse and Greek and Roman mythology, which Greek and Roman mythology they're all the same gods with different names, but who's to say all of these other gods don't exist? And the one true God created them, and then he popped them out to their dimensions, Asgard and wherever. And so they do exist out there. And at some point, they figured out how to make contact with us puny mortals. But it's, it gets into the multiverse theory, and that all of these different things actually exist, but it all exists within the structure of, like, what we know and believe as far as God and Christianity and all of that. So, what do you think about all that? Any?
Well, my opinion on a lot of the other gods sort of thing. I think that humans have a tendency to rationalize things that they don't understand. I think that the telephone game plays a strong part in shaping different cultures around the world. So, you know, that's why you'll hear a lot of like similar things with so many different beliefs. They'll have like sort of a through line where they all sort of believe the, you know, the same thing. And then that's of course with several different topics. An easy one, of course, would be like Hercules, right? So you know, sort of brought up the is that Roman?
I think Hercules was Greek.
Greek. Yeah, I don't know. I know a lot about the Bible, but not tons about everything else. I should probably do some more reading. But anyway, the constellation for Hercules is based on the biblical constellation for Jesus, and Hercules, of course, is the son of, you know, the powerful, almighty Zeus, and so you see these sort of parallels in so many different religions, and I think that a lot of it, my personal and again, I can be swayed with you know, evidence, I suppose. I don't have any biases that I'm sticking to, but I think a lot of it is just people trying to explain things that they can explain, and they hear little sound bites of truth, and they sort of piece everything together, and then you know, over time you develop sort of a, you know, a new religion or a new belief or a new culture, and things, you know, go around there. So I don't know a lot about Norse mythology. You know, a little bit. You know, I've seen the Marvel movies. I know about the big wolf that eats the worlds and stuff.
Fenrir.
Yeah. And it, you know, it's kind of cool seeing him in the movie. Of course, in the Norse mythology, it would have been no contest, obviously. But I don't know, a multiverse thing, especially thinking about heaven being a, you know, obviously I still, even as a different dimension, I wouldn't be much of a supporter of hell. I don't know how it all operates. There are, you know, of course it says in the Bible that there are things that we don't know, but the things which have been revealed to us belong unto us and to our children forever. And so I just sort of chalk that up to one of those things that we don't know.
So I guess what kind of gets that theory kicking around, especially with like heaven being a separate dimension, and this is something that you and I talked about last time, you know, after the official show, was that nobody who has died at this point has actually gone to heaven. Like, and that's you explain it a lot better than what I'm going to.
Sure.
But you know, it basically what it boils down to is that, and it's biblically stated that you know, they're asleep right now, and that they will be taken to heaven at some point, you know, after Jesus returns and all of that. And so that kind of, at least for me,
had you heard that before?
Yes. And
okay.
Yes, that was something that I had heard before, and I actually agree with you on that as well. You want to give a little more in depth on that, because
oh, sure,
you explained that really, really well.
Well, yeah, I feel like there's so much to it. Okay, let me see if I can do it nice and tight. So the word hell that we read in the Bible, right? If it's in the Old Testament, it's the Hebrew word Sheol, and my pronunciation is garbage. So if anybody has something to say about that, I already admit that it sucks. But anyway, so yeah, it's a Hebrew word for Sheol, and then in the New Testament, it's a Greek word Hades, right? And both of them simply mean the grave, just like we understand what a grave is. Solomon in the Old Testament wished for wisdom, and got it. And so you read in Ecclesiastes chapter 9 specifically, where he talks about dead people not having any thoughts, no love, no hatred, no sort of nothing. It's sort of just like a blackness, kind of like when you're asleep. It's just, you don't have a sense of anything. You don't even really have a sense of time. I mean, when you sleep for 8 hours, does it feel like 8 hours? Like an 8-hour workday, or does it feel like 5 minutes? So the idea that we don't really have this, we don't have a concept of anything when you're dead, I feel like is pretty understandable to sleep. But that's how the Bible talks about it. And David in Psalms prays to God, "Don't leave my soul in hell." And so is he describing a place of fire that you can be redeemed from? Because there's not a whole lot of talk about that. Or is he saying, don't leave me just dead, don't leave me asleep in this sort of eternal blackness or whatever? Which I think is what hell actually is. What the Bible is describing is sort of just a permanent sleeping state. And anyway, so fast forward to the New Testament, and we have everything that's happened before and is happening now. And then in Thessalonians, I think even maybe in 2nd Thessalonians, it's sort of talking about the future, and it's talking about Jesus coming back, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. You even have Paul saying, talking about dead people, brethren, I would not have you ignorant concerning them which are asleep, that ye something like you don't have any hope. Hold on, give me half a second.
Not a problem.
I hate mispronouncing it, but it's I would not have you ignorant concerning them which are asleep. So it's 1 Thessalonians 4:13. But I would not have you ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep, that ye sorrow not, even others which have no hope, or even like them that have no hope. So because it says, for if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so them which sleep in Jesus will God bring with him. So basically the story is that once Jesus does come back and there's the trumpet and all that stuff, the dead in Christ shall rise first. I even think it's in here in Thessalonians 4, 13-ish, right around there. It's right here in 4:16, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. So if it's talking about the dead rising in Thessalonians in the future with Jesus Christ's return, then they couldn't be in heaven now. Otherwise, this wouldn't make any sense. And if this, is just so blatant, and this isn't the only part that it sort of talks about it. It's compounded, multiple times. But those things couldn't be written if grandma was in heaven. And I miss my grandmother. My dad's dead. I miss him. And he's the one that taught me all this. You know what I mean? The idea that he'd be alive and I could talk to him, like, trust me, nobody wishes they had that connection more than me. But it just, it just isn't there.
Right. So. And that's something that I 100% agree with you on. But that gets to my theory of the multiple dimensions. And so with heaven being an alternate dimension, like something separate from the earth, then Jesus' return is like basically opening up the doorway to that other dimension, that then at that point, then we're allowed to cross over and go there. And
or there could be some sort of global event that happens that sort of resets some sort of earthly cycle. Biblically, the earth that we're in now is, sort of referred to as like the second earth, because the first one that God made perfect with the dinosaurs and everything was destroyed. And it was destroyed between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, which is where, you had the dragon, or the devil, or the dragon and his angels fought against Michael and his angels, and the dragon prevailed not. And and being cast to the earth, sort of, you read about this in Isaiah, but it caused the ice age that killed everything. And then God, the Spirit of God, moved upon the face of the waters, and that word "moved" is the Hebrew word for brooded, like a mother hen broods or warms, when she incubates her eggs, right? So God warmed the earth up, fixing the ice age, and that's between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. and of course he did that because he is light. It says in the Bible, God is light, and in him there's no darkness at all. And we know that what radiates off of light is heat. So the idea that we had an earth and it was destroyed, and then God sort of fixed it, and then that, it's sort of what we have now, that there might be some sort of event that happens that puts us through a similar cycle, and then on the other side of it is what could be paradise. But that's where my education starts to sort of drop off, because I feel like once I'm in that moment, I won't have anything really to worry about. And if it's not happening now, so it doesn't benefit me a whole lot, I feel like I have a ticket to the ride, so I don't have to worry about what the ride's going to be like. I'm just, I just know that I'm going, so everything else is sort of moot. So yeah, when it comes to like Revelation and everything, talking about the last book of the Bible, or the end of days and the apocalypse and whatever, I don't even really know a whole lot. It's riddled with figures of speech. I have a book on figures of speech. It's like this thick. and there's like 150 figures of speech in the English language, up to 40 variations of each. It's a lot of studying to do for something that I'm not going to have a whole lot of control over once it happens. So I usually tend to stick with the things that matter to me now.
Right. Even if you've got all the PhDs in the world, it's still not going to change the fact that when it happens, it's going to happen. Like, you don't get to pick your seat on the bus there.
Right. Yeah. And another thing too that I suppose is that one of the controversial beliefs that I have is that I believe there is a formula to sort of guarantee that you have a ticket to heaven, but I don't think that it's the only way, because then there'd be a lot of really doomed people, especially in other countries that never even heard of the book. What's sort of God's plan for that? If he were a lawyer looking to stick to the letter of the law. And I think that we're sort of demonstrated that God isn't a lawyer that's looking to condemn people, right? He told Adam, "In the day thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die." Well, he did, and he didn't physically die that day, spiritually died, but he didn't physically die that day. But if he didn't have to come up with a plan B, to have Jesus come and save everybody after Adam blew it, but he did anyway, right? And then we see Jesus mirror that when the Pharisees threw the woman at his feet, said the law of Moses says, we caught this woman in the act of adultery. In the act of adultery, the law of Moses says we should stone her. What do you say? And then he fiddles around the dirt, thinking of some sort of genius answer, and then comes up with one and says, he without sin cast the first stone. And what's interesting too is that word sin in Greek meant that specific sin, adultery. So not just any sin, but that specific one. And of course, all the Pharisees were all guilty of that. So they all left. And then he said to the woman, where are the people that condemn you? She said, well, they're gone. He said, neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. So the idea that if you don't pray this specific prayer, which most people pray to Jesus, which you're not supposed to do anyway, right? He says that in what, John 16:23, that you don't pray to me, you pray to God. Yeah, but if the idea that if you don't do this specific prayer that you're doomed, it's just sort of laughable, and it flies in the face of the overall theme of the Bible, which is God's love for his creation. And I think that it's because, much like the state, of course, right, the church learned a way to militarize and monetize the word of God. Right. And that's where I think that a lot of that hell stuff sort of came from, of course, with, John Milton's Paradise Lost and Dante's and, Divine Comedy, Dante's Inferno. They got a lot of inspiration from that satirical, theatrical, sort of writings, and was like, man, we could scare people to death with this stuff and get them to pay us money, and we can make a pretty penny, And if you look at all those European cathedrals, they're all beautiful. And architecture is insane, and there's a lot of value in it. And where did they get that money? Well, they stole it from people. So yeah, that hell thing. I just, I'm not in it.
So I do disagree with you on that. I do think that it exists, but like I said, I consider it an alternate realm, like a different reality. And I don't think it's someplace that, like, I think you and I probably agree on that. It's not someplace that, like, people are getting cast into. That's just the place that Lucifer and his demons got sent to. Like that's their eternal.
Well, Lucifer's on the earth. We read about that in Job, right? When God says, "Where are you coming from?" He's like, "Oh, I've been traveling up and down the earth." And
Yeah,
then he's
but
like, "Have you set your eyes on my man Job?" Okay, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you.
so I think so. With that, I think he takes a little more liberty with his interdimensional traversing. Like, and who can blame him? Like, would you if you had the opportunity to not stay there, would you stay in hell like all the time? And obviously the answer would be no. So like he takes his liberties to spend as much time on the earth doing whatever he wants.
Because he knows it's limited.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I go with that. But you did kind of with the fall of Lucifer, or the fall of with the fall and the kind of the reset and everything. So something that my son had asked me about was if God created us in his image, but we all look so much different. He was like, what's the image exactly? Like, what does God look like? And God doesn't look like any of us. Like God is an eternal being of, as you said, like he's always referred to as just this
spirit
of like magnificent light and heat, and he's effectively like an all-powerful energy being, basically. But so the way I described it to my son, I was like, when you have a dream and you see yourself in your dream, do you look the way you look when you go look in the mirror? And he was like, well, no, not always. I was like, so, like for me, whenever I dream and I picture myself in the dreams, I'm a 22-year-old, like peak physical specimen that was, playing basketball and working out regularly and all that stuff. I'm not a 37-year-old dad that's getting a little bit of a beer belly, And like, so our image of ourselves is not necessarily our image. So when God created us in his image, he created us in what he envisioned, not necessarily to look like what he looks like in the mirror. You got any thoughts on that sort of, because that gets into
Sure, I do actually. Well, one, in that verse, I believe it's 129 or something like that. Genesis 129, or 27, right around there. God says we, right? So we have created man in our image, after our likeness. And a lot of people are like, well, there, bam, you got the Trinity right there. And that's, of course, is the royal we, just like the Queen speaks. And but that's, I'm not answering your question, but I just thought it was important to always address that. Anyway, we were made 3-part beings, right? So body, soul, and spirit. And so the likeness that we have with God, that he's referencing there, is the spirit part, which is, of course, how Adam was created. And that's why he had that, sort of that perfect connection with God that was lost, and that nobody is born with anymore, which is that spirit part. And when we are born again or saved, or whatever people want to call it now, that's what we get back, right? Jesus is our mediator. He is the bridge. He is the way. He is the way that we get that connection to God back, because now we're just body and soul. And the whole point of all the rigmarole of the Bible and what Jesus accomplished was to get that spirit back, so that created in God's likeness, we are to be sort of the same material, if you will, if you want to call it that, as God, which is that spirit part. So I that's how I understand that.
Cool. Rather
than like a physical sort of likeness thing.
Gotcha. That's awesome. I like that.
I don't know if you heard that, but yeah.
No, that was the first.
Very cool. Well, what else? What other theory stuff?
I had it and then
Or I could just keep going.
yeah, go for a second because it'll come back to me.
No, it's cool. It's cool. Do you know much about Martin Luther?
Some.
The German
Yeah.
guy that right. So in the 1500s or ish, I'm pretty sure it was the 1500s when he lived in Germany. He never read the New Testament. He only had the Old Testament. He was terrified of God. Because God was just this, sort of judgment, and of course, Martin Luther, as educated as he was at that time, didn't really know a lot of the language or the idioms or the vernacular of the Hebrews. So when he's reading these things, he doesn't necessarily understand things the way that the Hebrews do. So for instance, like the Hebrew idiom of permission, where it says in the Bible that God did something, but it's because they were sort of forbidden from mentioning the name of other gods. So when they say that God did something, it doesn't mean that God did it. It means that he had to allow it to happen, whether that was because of a person's free will or whatever. They always said it that way. To give a good example that I'm sure most people are familiar of, when in Job, where it says, the Lord gave and the Lord taketh away, blessed be the name of the Lord. Job is talking about two different lords there, because of the Mosaic law. He's not allowed to say the name of another god, right? And that law is in Exodus 23:13. In case any nerds want to look it up. So he's not allowed to give responsibility for what's happening to someone else. So what he uses is he employs a figure of speech called antanaclases, which is where you use the same word, spelled the same, pronounced the same, but with two different meanings, right? So we know Benjamin Franklin, right? He said famously, if we do not sign in the Declaration of Independence, right? If we do not hang together, we shall surely hang separately. So that's an example of, where he obviously means if we don't stick together, they will kill us. So it's the same word, spelled the same, pronounced the same, with two different meanings. And we know that Job was not talking about God when he said the Lord hath taken away, because the very next verse says, in all this, Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. Well, if charging God or blaming God would be foolish, and that's something that Job didn't do, well, then Job wasn't talking about God when he said the Lord hath taken away. He had to have been talking about somebody else. And we know from the first verse of the first chapter of Job that he was a perfect, meaning spiritually mature, perfect and upright man, one that feared God and eschewed evil. So he would have been sort of educated in, the law of Moses and what he can and can't get away with. And whoever wrote the book of Job, whether it was him or somebody else, would have also understood that, but they needed to tell the story without breaking the law. And you see that sort of language repeated over and over again in the Old Testament. And then, of course, once we get to the New Testament, that's when Jesus sort of exposes the inner workings of the devil, because nobody was allowed to talk about it in the Old Testament. So the idea that he's revealing it then sounds kind of late, but it only sounds late if you understand that, it seems that way if you think that they were allowed to talk about it this whole time, but they weren't. And so that, and the reason was because God wanted people to stay focused on him, to make sure that, the culture was preserved so that Jesus could be born and carry all of the stuff that he had to do. So, I forgot how I got around to it. So sorry, but yeah. Anyway, that I think is a cool one for people to know, that God isn't this arbitrary person to give and take away from you, sort of at his will. That's just not the business that God's in. So.
And so where is it? Because it kind of lays it out. Gosh, I wish I was a little more directly versed as you are, but doesn't it lay it out somewhere, like more or less like the list of what Satan is permitted to do, like on the earth and everything? Because he's kind of got a list of rules that he more or less has to abide by.
Yeah, I don't know if it's in necessarily one spot, but we know that he has power over the world, as in the the whole world. And I think that he still has to operate within a certain legal framework, just as God does, right? So we know, it says in 3 different places that God can't lie, right? I think it's in Titus 1:2 says it's impossible for God to lie. In Hebrews, it says that it said he can't lie in Titus rather, and then it says it's impossible for God to lie in Hebrews, and then I think in Numbers, in the Old Testament, it says that God's not a man that he should lie, something like that. So that answers the can God do anything thing right away, right? So God can't lie. But then we know that based on all these different things that God has to, he almost operates like a vampire. Whereas, like when it comes to prayer, right, you have to give God sort of permission to get involved into your life. Otherwise, you sort of can't violate that free will thing that he sort of set into motion, right? We know that, I'm sure he didn't want Jesus dead a second longer than was necessary, but in the Hebrew culture, you're not considered legally dead until you're buried. Not just dead, but buried for 3 days and 3 nights. So God waited so that Jesus's death was not just, a death, but a legal death. And then I'm sure the millisecond that, that the clock ticked over past the 3 day, 3 night thing, he was immediately resurrected. I'm sure of it. So I'm almost certain that the devil operates in the same way, right? Having power over the world. And of course, Adam had that power and relinquished it to the devil. And we know that because the devil, when he was tempting Jesus, was like, I will give, if you bow down and worship me, I will give you the world as it was given to me. Well, then who gave it to him, right? And then we we sort of learned the story of what happened between Adam and him, to answer that question. So yeah, I don't know if it's specifically outlined what he can and can't do. But there are moments where you can see, like in Job, where God says, you can sort of do whatever you want to Job, but you can't hurt him, physically. And then sort of the rules change throughout Job, and then of course he is repaid, I think 10 times what he ends up losing. Besides the 10 children that he had that died, he gets back. And of course, the reason that Job lost all that stuff and his children died was because he let fear dominate his life, right? He was worried that his children had sinned and cursed God in their hearts, and he prayed about it every single day. And that fear being a big part of his life, and him being a man of God, sort of making him a target, the devil sought to, exploit that. And because of Job sort of blowing it made it to where God couldn't protect him the way that he wanted to, right? You see that in the conversation that God has with the devil in that first chapter of Job, where the devil says, you've put a hedge about Job, meaning almost like a garden hedge or like a bubble sort of around him. And it's difficult, it's supposed to be biblically difficult for evil to go through that bubble. And the only way that they're sort of able to is if people, let them in. That's supposed to be, the thing. But it's not perfect, obviously, because there's innocent people that are purely innocent, like little baby children, that have horrible stuff happen to them all the time. But that's certainly not God's will. Anyway, yeah, I know that was a long-winded answer to, is there a place where the devil has rules? But no, I don't think specifically there is.
Okay,
and then you can clip all that out.
I kind of swore there was something that specified that he had like control over the weather and some other stuff, but
yeah, the weather's one of them. Yeah, I think they call him like the god of the wind, or
yeah, I can't remember what the whole
like
list was or anything like that. But...
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I remembered because you had talked about like people in other countries who will never read a Bible, will never hear the word of Christianity whatsoever. And so C.S. Lewis in the Chronicles of Narnia, I think it was the last book, The Final Battle, like he kind of, in a very fairy tale-ish way, kind of gets into some of his the philosophy on those who worship other gods, and then even like in some ways those who don't worship anything at all, like that it's all sort of for lack of a better way of putting it, it all sort of ties back to God. Like God allows it all to happen, and even though it may be done in the name of whatever, it all ties back to in His name and to serve His purpose. So, what do you got? Any thoughts on that kind of stuff? Elaborate on that position.
Well, I mean, I think that if that is a held belief, or if other people are believing in different gods or no gods, just like you are with your kids, right, or I am with mine, you have to be sort of understanding that with free will and free thought, there are consequences to that, and that's why God has worked so hard to deliver sort of this correct message, right? If you were to think like, what could I do for my children and my children's children and my children's children's children that would be like the best thing, maybe I could get like a big book of information that they could sort of frame their lives around. Now as far as what's to happen to those people, right? It says in the Bible that God is the searcher of hearts, right? Not us, not me. So if God is going to be the searcher of hearts, I think that God has got those people taken care of. I don't know what that means, and frankly, it's not really into my business. I think that as far as talking to people about stuff, I'm always interested in helping people out when they have questions, or anything like that. But sort of never is it displayed in the Bible to seek out these people that believe radically different stuff and beat them to death with this book. That's never supposed to be the purpose, right? I think specifically it says in Ephesians to speak the truth in love. I'm almost certain it's in Ephesians, which is in the New Testament, so it's a message to the modern day church, right? It's not like the Old Testament, which isn't necessarily applicable anymore because Jesus fulfilled the law. The law of the Old Testament, He fulfilled it, so we don't live under it anymore. So it's funny too. A lot of people bring up stuff from the Old Testament, like, what about this? How do you live your life with not eating shellfish or whatever? Of course, we don't live under that anymore, so it's not applicable. And oftentimes people aren't really happy with that answer because they think they got you, or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I don't think that people believing in something else or another thing is an irredeemable sort of sin. And I think that God, right, because just to get sort of touch back on the purpose of our existence, at least as far as the Bible displays, is family, right? It's sort of God's love for all of us, even the bad ones, which for me it's very difficult to think that I would ever have that sort of a thought about my enemies. or the people that I don't like, or monsters like a Hitler, or or something like that, right? So one of the North Korean leaders, it's difficult for me to feel any sort of compassion for those people, but maybe that's why I'm not God, but that's sort of his message throughout the entire thing, and that's very difficult for Christians to swallow, or even just humans to swallow, which is why you have people like the Westboro Baptist Church telling homosexuals that they're going to burn. That's not because God says they're going to burn. That's because these people don't like them, and it's a people thing. And that's they're, of course, while they're trying to promote the Bible, they're doing one of the biggest disservices that they could ever do. Yeah, I think God's gonna get everybody sort of taken care of, because that's the business that He's always been in. So there's no evidence or anything to suggest that anything would be different. I don't know if that really answers your question, but people that believe in different stuff, I think that even if they never agree to some church person knocking on their door, that they're going to be sorted out.
Sounds good. I like it. Anything else you wanted to touch on?
I don't know. There's so much. There's so much that can be touched on. I'm excited talking about. I feel like I didn't say enough about I don't know, different theories and stuff. One thing that I sort of talked about before we started to record, that I think that you will, I don't know, maybe be a little thought provoking. So not everybody I interact with is super jacked on the Bible or any of that stuff. And one of the biggest reasons that they say that they're not really into it is because of all the supernatural stuff. Have you heard that before?
Yes.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
And what's funny is the idea of being of not really being against, but not being bought in because of the supernatural side of it is one of the most consistent mindsets that humanity has ever had. Right. So if you think about what is supernatural, or or even better, what has been supernatural that isn't supernatural anymore, right? I mean, it wasn't even that long ago that they said that the top speed for humans is going to be like 50 miles an hour. It's never going to get faster than that, like 100 years ago or whatever. And anything faster than that, of course, would be witchcraft. I mean, they burned a lot of people at the stake for practicing witchcraft, which was just a blanket statement for things that they don't understand. Maybe some of them were practicing witchcraft, but I'm sure most of them were just doing stuff that the mob didn't approve of.
Both the rooms that both of us are in are completely full of all things witchcraft, basically. I mean,
all things witchcraft. Yeah. I definitely. So, but a lot of what people have ever thought when it comes to science, people have thought was witchcraft. Or I think people have thought was supernatural. And then it turns out that it wasn't supernatural. It was the natural state operating at a super level, or operating at a level, sort of beyond our current understanding. I was just listening to the Joe Rogan, Michael Malice podcast that was just done, like, I don't know, like a week ago or something like that. And they were talking about DMT, big surprise coming from Joe Rogan, and how the people that go through these trips, I've never done it myself, but that go through these trips, they go through this veil thing and they meet these other beings. They don't really know how to describe them and what to call them. They aren't things that have like a 3D they're not like a carbon based thing. They're like just something else, and they seem to know everything about them and everything about everybody they know. But it's not them. It's not like a reflection of them. It's a different sort of being, but they don't know really how to describe it. Operating on this, on this plane that is opened up through doing DMT, whatever it stands for. And I just thought that was really interesting because that almost sounds like that supernatural state that people are so ready to call nonsense when you sort of hear the same thing from all these different people that have done this drug, something that our body produces naturally. But by people that have done this drug, they all have sort of the same story. And if you look at a lot of the images that people have been able to sort of recreate, you think about how unique people are, but they have these similar experiences with these beings. And you look up these accounts, and I sort of did a little bit of reading after I listened to the podcast, and it turns out that a lot of people have had like very like eerily similar experiences with these other beings. And I don't know if I call them angels or demons or spirits or what, but it's just funny how people are so quick to dismiss the supernatural, when dismissing the supernatural is something that humanity has done since probably the beginning of time. And then our idea of what is supernatural changes, with every new technological development or every new scientific, thing of understanding. And then now it's not supernatural anymore. So what if the things that we are suggesting as Bible believers or whatever, maybe we're just ahead of the curve on some things. Maybe we're not right on everything. I don't say that I am, but maybe as far as like accepting that there might be something going on, right? Maybe we're gonna beat that 50 mile per hour, land speed record, and it would, obviously we did, but those concepts were alien to people for forever, so the idea that we're sort of chipping away at these walls that people put up, that being, I don't believe in anything supernatural. Well, that doesn't make you a unique thinker. That sort of that means to me that you've quit the game of curiosity, or you've quit the game of thought. You've quit thinking what if, and I think that for anybody that has a pursuit in kind of anything, you can't do that, and I don't even think you can do it. I don't even think you can be open with everything and not be open when it comes to, sort of a spiritual thing, whether that be a God or a Buddha or whatever. I think that for the people that, like atheists, and I don't mean to rag on atheists, but for the people that are like, there's absolutely no way, you just kind of sound like, one of the petulant children that said there's no way we're going to beat that 50-mile-an-hour speed record. It just sounds, you've quit the game. And it's funny, is most atheists are supposed to be these like free thinking, people that aren't conforming with, society. And it's almost one of the most conforming things you can do, is to quit.
It has largely been my experience, especially with the most ardent, militant atheists, that their religious belief in disbelief is almost stronger than my belief in the things I actually believe in.
Right. Yeah. Because kind of like I said when we first started talking about this in this episode, is the reason I got into this just because I'm pursuing, a more true, a more moral, a more ethical sort of idea. And when it comes to the Bible, I just feel like, when you put the pieces together, in the way that is described in the book, it meets something that I otherwise can't explain. There's a lot of scientific discoveries that are mentioned in the Bible that weren't like, sort of globally recognized or even really discovered for hundreds of, some of them thousands of years. It talks about the earth being a sphere, written well before people believe that. Back when people thought the earth was flat, it's talking about that, or how it could be day on one part of the earth while it's night on another part of the earth at the same time. Talking about how we have this orbital, relationship with the sun. There's a lot of things that are brought up that when, so that's what I just think is like my best guess when you take all these things into consideration, is that maybe it's true, maybe it's real. What if? And I kind of hate the silly churchy sayings that people do, but one of the ones that I've always sort of, I don't know, given more consideration than I do most of them, is I'd rather believe and be wrong, than not believe and be wrong. Or it's, I'd rather believe and be proven right than not believe and be proven wrong, something like that. Because I have nothing to lose, right? If I die, nothing's on the other side, and then so be it. At least I try to live my life. Anyway. Yeah, I'll never even know anyway, right? But at least I tried to live my life as like being a better person and spreading a message of positivity and compassion and whatnot. That's just, so I think that it opens the door for more thought, which is the most that we could ever really hope for as like a human, is to be curious and explore it. So that's like my final thought.
And I think the way that you go about that, being curious and exploring, but also being very open and like you're willing to have conversations about it and admit that there are things that are your opinion, and it's the conclusion that you've come to through what you've studied. But it could also, you're still open to the possibility that you could be wrong, and you're willing to be proven wrong. Like, I think that's an excellent way to approach that. And that was kind of another reason why I wanted to come and do this again. And I'd like to do another one again later, because I don't want my podcast to be 100% politics. That gets old and boring after a while. And I do want to have more.
Let's talk about some more horrible stuff.
I do want to do more of these with you, because I go to church and I have a large church family, and I would like them to see these conversations and interact with me and with you on the conversations and get input, and like, because the more ideas and the more it gets kicked around, and there'll be people that I don't go to church with, people that don't go to church at all, that might see this, somewhere down the line, and they might have questions about this stuff. And the fact that we're willing to be open and have dialogue about it, and not, be like a Westboro Baptist and browbeat people over the head with a Bible that we're not even correctly representing. Like, I think that's a good thing for a Christian biblical message.
Yeah, and I'm just looking for the best thing, and I do that in terms of the the philosophical things I believe in. I do that as far as like my finances or my hobbies, or I do it with everything. I'm just looking for what's the new like best stuff. And so yeah, it seems weird to me that some people would just be willing to sort of shut themselves off. I was talking to my mom about cryptocurrency, and I think I've got her bought in a little bit, but initially she was just like, oh, that's just a bunch of silly old nothing, that doesn't mean anything. And I was like, decentralized finance that one government or one company can't manipulate at will, like there's something wrong with that. And but she wasn't trying to have a rational, logical conversation. She just wanted to hold on to her, oh, young kids doing young stuff is stupid. So I just think that, yeah, people should open themselves up, because saying that you don't believe in anything supernatural, history has proven that every time, not every time, but most of the time when people have said that or thought that, they were proven wrong. We're never going to put a man on the moon, and I know there's a lot of theories around that, but I believe we put a man on the moon, or we're never going to get into space. Maybe that one's not as up for debate as much as the moon landing.
Right, whether somebody actually landed on the moon or not,
we made it to space.
Does not diminish the fact that there is an international space station that's floating out there and
now, orbiting the Earth. Right. Yeah. And I never, it was weird. Of course I had this revelation while I was smoking. But I never really thought about that before, that it's not, that it's something that a lot of people say, but it's like, have you really thought that through? How many times, in science have, and that's why we have a scientific process, right? Because people are like, well, that can't be possible. And then there's always one person or one group of people that is like, okay, but what if it is though? What would we do if it were possible? I think this is going to sound silly, and I know we're trying to wrap up, but have you ever seen the Core movie?
Uh-huh.
Kind of a silly movie, and they're like, even if there was a way to like jumpstart the center of the Earth, this giant ball of iron, there's just no way we can get there. And then one person's like, yeah, well, what if there was? And then the movie sort of takes on, and I just think that kind of stuff is so cool. And I think most people think that stuff is cool, but then it's like, as soon as they leave the theater, as soon as they the movie is over, they forget it. They forget those lessons. But what if it is? So like, how would things change for you if it were? And another motivator, and probably the more likely one, is that people are scared of responsibility, because if nothing matters, then you're not responsible for yourself or the people around you. But if there is meaning behind stuff, then it sort of means that you should get up when you're supposed to. You should do what you're supposed to. You should bless the people around you. It means that you should do something, and people don't like that. I get it. I think that's a natural biological state is to figure out how to be more lazy, right? That's why we build muscle, because the body is constantly trying to be more lazy. But that's why we have to, fight those urges off. So
absolutely.
Anyway.
If we all spend a little more time trying to explore those things, those maybes, then maybe we can make a lot more progress than what we have. Right.
All right, man. Very cool.
Thanks for coming on again.
Hey, no problem. I watch these all the time. I don't know if you connect too much with your audience, but I really enjoy that you do this, and it feels much more not to be mean or anything, but because the production is a little less, it feels more real. It feels like I'm listening to like a real person Whereas a lot of times, you listen to these overly produced things and it just sounds like they're trying to do like radio zingers. Nobody's really talking about real stuff. And so I appreciate it. And I'm really glad to be a part of it.
Well, I'm glad at least somebody gets something out of it. And with that being said, anybody who happens to listen to this, please engage with us, throw some stuff at us, questions you have about some of the theories that we threw out, or your own theories as well. Like I'd like for the episodes to be more than just me talking or me talking to somebody else. Like I definitely want interaction, and I do get a little bit of interaction, not a whole lot, but hopefully, if nothing else, these serve to kind of give people some different perspectives on stuff. Especially, like I mostly do it for like the people who I'm friends with, because I know a lot of them probably aren't going to go look for some of those alternate ideas that maybe you and I see all the time. And so I want to present that stuff because, if they're my friend, there's a better chance that they might listen to me talk about it than they will listen to like a Dave Smith or, somebody like that. So that's why I try to do this kind of stuff, is hopefully just to get people to think about something different and maybe start to explore some of those alternate ideas, or if nothing else, just stick around and listen to me talk about them once in a while.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely.
But thanks for coming on, and
of course,
for everybody listening, thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks.